Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Ton père a eu un accident de voiture.
C'est grave. Papa est mort, c'est ça?
C'est les gendarmes qui sont venus me l'annoncer.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Ton père a eu un accident de voiture.
C'est grave. Papa est mort, c'est ça?
C'est les gendarmes qui sont venus me l'annoncer.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Ton père a eu un accident de voiture.
C'est grave. Papa est mort, c'est ça?
C'est les gendarmes qui sont venus.
Donc c'est nos petits...
Oui. Bueno, vamos a ir empezando esta rueda de
Okay, we're going to
prensa.
commence the
Como
press
sabéis,
conference.
vamos a
As you
empezar
know, we're
con
going
las
to
películas
introduce
que
one of the
compiten
films
en
that
la
competes
sección oficial,
in the
que es la
official
sección
section of the
oficial
17th
de
edition of the
Sebastián.
San Sebastian
Es
Film
de
Festival.
Lycéen,
It's called Les
con el
Lycéens,
título
Winter Boy.
internacional Winter Boy,
It's
y
its
contamos
international
con cuatro
title, and we have an
importantes
important part of the artistic
Os voy a presentar
team,
por
and I'm going to
orden,
introduce you
desde
on
la
the
otra
panel from the
esquina hasta donde
far
estamos.
end.
Están con nosotros el
We have
actor
with us the actor
Vincent
Vincent Lacoste,
la actriz Juliette
the actress Juliette Binoche, director and scriptwriter Christopher Honoré, the actor, leading actor Paul KIRCHER, and the producer Philippe Martin. And as it's a press conference in which there are a lot of people here, I'm going to start directly with the questions. Please, there's a first question in the front row. Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for the film. I have a couple of questions, one from Christophe Noël, another one and the other one for Paul. Christophe, how did you choose Paul? And for Paul, how did you confront your character, which I thought it was quite complex, and I think you do a really marvelous job with your character. Thank you. Well, how did I find Paul? Well, first, I arrived after seeing many actors, very many of them. We started the casting when I was still writing the script with Martin, the producer, and I said I wanted to start to do the casting before finishing writing the script. We saw about 300 boys, and we started to select them slowly but surely in different stages. And there was a moment in which we chose Paul at the end of the day. And I knew I was looking for someone who, perhaps this is a strange formula, but I wanted a young boy of today. I wanted to base myself on a very strong personality and not only in an actor whose sensitivity I liked. But I wanted, for this film, it was so contemporary, it had to be related to the personality of the character and the actor that I was going to select to play the role. That's the way Paul invited himself to the film, and then as from him we constructed this film. The question was how I addressed portraying the role. Well, I thought, well, it is true that Christophe took me there just when we were going to shoot the film. For me, the shooting of the film, and it's true, well, I had very good colleagues with Juliette Binoche and Vincent Lacoste, but my main colleague during the shoot was Christophe, the truth be said. And with him, or was he that took me to that place where he wanted to, in a very delicate and very pleasant way at the same time? Well, good morning, congratulations to Paul, KIRCHER, and the actresses and the actors, all of them. I want to congratulate you above all to Juliette Binoche for her Donosti Award. And your dramatic role is very moving and very emotional. You're an actress, a marvelous dramatic actress. How did you feel
Au sentiment que vous provoquez dans le public. Excusez-moi pour ma
with the feelings that you awaken in the audience? I'm sorry, my French is very rudimentary.
comment vous sentez
What was the question?
par rapport les sentiments que vous provoquez
How have you felt as regards to the feeling that you provoke in the audience?
Ça, vous vous débrouillez après. Hein. Moi, je fais ce que je peux.
Everyone does what they can. I do what I can during the shoot, and then the feelings that I awaken, well, that forms part of the magic of film, of what happens on the screen, and in us as actors, and how the audience receives this. Quite often, before a take, I'm already in connection. I'm already connected to the audience. It's quite strange, but that's the case for me. Cinema or theatre is a moment in which we receive something which is very intimate and quite particular from everyone. But it is something which we share in the unit together in a film theatre, and it's also individual and quite personal. Before a take, before I have to touch on a very deep emotion that the truth is, it is something that we want to hide behind a curtain, perhaps. It is true that the actor wants to awaken something in the audience and the people. Otherwise, why would we perform? We want to move people as if it were a transparent and invisible arrow, and then everyone can do what they can with that. And that is also happens through the director, who's like the owner of it. And at the end of the day, we want to move the audience, and that's quite obvious. Good morning and congratulations to all of you. The film is marvelous, and everyone's portrayal is as well. A question for Paul: what was the most difficult part? Shoot the sex scenes or trying to convey those feelings, those emotions with a bit of shame? What was the most difficult thing for you? What did you say, the sex scenes or?
Les sentiments, les émotions aussi ont, vous savez, vous voulez faire suicide, donc c'est difficile.
Those feelings, conveying those, even the suicide attempt, what was most difficult? I'm not too sure. I think that both were difficult. Both things form part of the whole, the same whole. All of that forms part of the same thing. And there weren't any scenes that were more difficult than others. Once the framework was set, with the rest of the characters, the storyline, and so on, and everything that takes place in the film, they were different stages of the same thing, but I can't say that there was something much more difficult than the other. At a moment, something that I thought that was difficult was the scene when I had that nervous attack, when he knows that his father's just died. Apart from that scene, during the shooting of the film, every day we shot different scenes, and all of that forms part of a whole. Every day we were completing the film a bit by bit and following with the creation process, or the creative process. It is true there were difficult scenes, but I can't say that one was more difficult than the other. Hi, good morning. I want a question for Christophe. Entering into the mind of a 17-year-old boy And that's what you propose to the spectators, to enter into the mind of that young boy. That was an exercise for you, personally speaking. Go down to those ages when you were 17. Was that a tough exercise? Yes. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since I was 17. So the truth is, it was an exercise and also a big challenge in the film. It was a narrative challenge, obviously, because the film tries to sketch the portrait of an adolescent character and also a formal challenge. I wanted the film, the shape of the film to be almost, the form of the film to be, or shape of the film to be adolescent. The way of telling the story, I wanted it to be a bit immature, a bit with doubts, free and easy, and the film they could find, and it wasn't a consolidated or an adult type film. The work on the narrative of the film was closely linked to adolescence, how to organically enter into the film in directing not only thematically through adolescence or through the dialogues. After this, we always address the same problem. We have to know that a character is observed by other people. Adolescence is also what we project in other people, in others, in the work, and our relationship. The mother, the father, the mother and the son, and the two brothers, the relationship between all of them, and the fact that they weren't adolescents anymore. And that's why in the film, adolescence is given value through the way other people look upon them and how they're projected. As a director, I consider that adolescence, or as a director, I like to know that the cinema is adolescence vis-a-vis other arts, such as painting, for example. I think that cinema belongs to adolescence. I hope that at least that it's always unfinished. It still has to be specified, not only from a solemn standpoint, and for me, adolescence is also a way of continuing to persevere in cinema. Any further questions, Alicia? Hi, I would like to talk about the issue of grieving, and on the other hand, the mental diseases or illnesses, how they're treated in the film. And Juliette, ask you to explain the mourning and the grief that the mother has to contain. She's always doubly guilty. She loses a husband and then she feels alone. So those both elements, how did you address that in your grieving?
C'est vrai que j'ai abordé ce thème avec Bleu.
I addressed this film in the film. I addressed this issue in the film Blue. In a car accident, I lose my husband and my daughter. When Christophe proposed, asked me to do the film, the truth is, after Blue, I received a lot of script about the grieving, and quite a lot of I rejected them because didn't want to repeat it. But on the other hand, I wanted to work with Christophe for many years, for a long time, and the truth is, I was more than excited. I was very happy, genuinely happy, of diving into this adventure. And I think that we all live through grieving. It's easy to project oneself into this separation. But it's also true, and I feel very moved now, that with the presence of the children, this is multiplied. It multiplies grief. And the interesting thing that I had to do is when I portrayed this, I had to hide it, and that multiplies things. When one contains one's emotions or resists oneself to them,
engranger cette situation-là. Et c'est vrai que
there's an over effort when we have to confront these situations. And for people who have lost a young husband, for example, the fact that you have to live that day to day with children, I can't imagine what that's got to be like. An actor works from the faith of what he or she believes in, and this situation of believing in it, simply it's my body that decides to transmit the emotions. I don't manufacture those emotions. I'm provoked by them. So therefore, I think that with the presence of Paul and Vincent, that multiplied this situation. And also with Christophe's story, I had a certain responsibility to tell a story that he's lived through, albeit there are differences, and they're very close to him. The fact that he has wanted to talk about a very personal situation multiplies the responsibility of an actress in a film and in a story and in the emotions, quite simply. Good morning. No, the question was, talk about the mental diseases, mental illnesses. The question that to Christophe Honoré about the issues that are addressed in the film. On the hand, the issue of grieving, and the other side, that of mental illnesses. Could you talk a little bit about that? It's a difficult remark to address. In this field, in cinema, we are always afraid of being indecent. While I was preparing the film, we shot in a hospital where there were a lot of young people in difficult situations, and I talked a lot to the doctors in that hospital. I also talked a lot with Paul. And more generally speaking, perhaps it's not a clear statement, but the period we've lived with through all of us through COVID has made younger people much more fragile, and have turned them into people that are people who are very vulnerable. And I think that the film takes echo of this, that is to say, through the portrait in the film. It portrays how these young people come up against the world which is a hostile place and not a place where they want to project themselves, and therefore it generates that feeling of retiring or even renouncing to the situation. So therefore I tried to address it from a way in which it also would tell something that I perceived about how fragile today's youth is. Yes, I would like to extend this question to the producer, to Philippe Martin, because as Christophe Honoré mentions, as seeing the film, I had the feeling that it talked about the way we're in the world now, post-COVID, how we're much more aware of the idea of loss and coexisting with grief. So therefore, I'd like to know a bit more what the producer got involved into this project, beyond, obviously, because of the personality of a director like Christophe Honoré, who addresses these tough issues and affects us so much, which to a greater or lesser extent, we've all gone through a grieving process because of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years. Well, the main reason is the director. To start off with, we produce a director before producing any issue. It's as the sixth film we've made with Christophe, and there already exists a certain faithfulness and the will of wanting to work together. And then we have to come to an agreement upon the film that's going to be made. when Christophe asked me about this idea, or talked to me about this idea, I didn't even address the question of whether I produce it or not. It was quite obvious to me. And what's quite obvious is that the certainty or the issue or the topic, but whether the tone was the right tone, we'd have to ask ourselves whether the tone could create a great film and a great emotion. The challenge of the film also was closely linked to the actors and to know who would be the main actor or the protagonist or the leading character. And a film such as this, it's specified once it's turned into the actor and the main actor, but we had to find that main actor quite a lot. And when we saw Paul, for me, it was quite obvious. And also, we were quite fortunate. I thought, great, I'm going to make this film, and plus we're going to discover these actors, and then obviously Vincent and Juliette. But it was quite clear that the film was solid, albeit it's not the right adjective, most adequate, but it was solid, it was strong, powerful. Good morning. I've got a question for the actors, and for Paul and Vincent and Juliette. What we've suffered through the pandemic, we've gone through many things, and we've confronted many things that we'd never thought were going to happen beforehand. I imagine all of you and these characters are well. And these three characters, what it seemed to me is there are two feelings, that grief and loneliness come to mind. Whether you've confronted the things, personal things that you've gone through the pandemic, did they form part of how you portrayed your roles? Vincent, perhaps you can talk about the loneliness of your character. Yes, I don't know what would be the relationship between COVID, loneliness. All of this amplifies things. It is true, nevertheless, we have a lot of difficulties to project ourselves and see the future as something positive on occasions. And on top of this, and in this case, when grief appears, people fall deeper into loneliness. I think that my character has to take care of his brother, but I don't think he's sufficiently mature enough to do so. So therefore, he divides himself between going through his own grief and also taking care of his brother and also his mother, as if it were going back, returning to the family, whereas he initially was in a dynamic of living on his own in Paris and building his own life. So he falls more into a lonely situation in this case. Paul, do you want to talk about loneliness? Well, I'm not too sure whether I've understood the question very well, but it is true that the other day, in a press conference, Christophe talked about this, and we hadn't talked about that for the film, but it seemed to me completely correct. The lockdown or COVID has meant that we all found ourselves alone and we couldn't do many things. And in the film, Luca, even within this context, he sees himself with his mother and his brother. He has a lot of experience and experiences a lot of things on his own. And as Christophe said, that age is an age in which one needs to experience things on one's own. And in this case, it is true that COVID isolated everyone, but it's also true that at certain moments we have to be on our own to experience and live things without necessarily being with others. And as regards to what you were asking me before about how I addressed this film, once I had the framework set with the mother and the brother, Juliette and Vincent, once I had the story written by Christophe Honoré, after I had all of those solid bases or foundations, I didn't realize it, but multiplying the different experiences on my own, things that were very stupid or very simple at times, or things that we give little importance to, but multiplying those experiences, which I think this is something that helped me and were very useful. I would like to ask a question to Christophe Honoré. There's something that I like about the film, and that's how physical it is all the time, that the characters touch each other constantly. The body is always almost seen very clearly, and there's an arc about the sexuality of the protagonist and the leading actor, which is, I like the way it's addressed, and this is something, why is this obsession about all of the other things, from what's emotional, physical, when you see a film in which the characters, beyond psychological processes they go through, they express themselves so physically. I think that's very pleasing because the characters grow, and plus with the support of actors that you have in this film. And the question I would like to ask you about this, how important it is, the body, and how important it is to interact, how the characters interact physically beyond the relationship they have from a psychological standpoint.
Oui, je crois que c'est un peu en tout cas la manière dont j'essaye de travailler avec les comédiens.
That's how I try to work with the actors. I have 3 here that probably say that not at all. But I don't give them too many psychological indications. No, I don't usually do this. But, however, I give them physical indications. I like to do the choreography of different scenes. Quite often I show them, in fact, I like the idea, this sensuality, the idea of sensuality. And be careful what I'm going to say, I've got to be careful. What defines a family is normally that sensuality when one has a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they turn up to the house of the family of the boyfriend or girlfriend. The way they touch each other is something that you detect straight away. You can always see what is the sensual identity of a family, and that is something which is very important to me. Quite often in films, well, at least, well, the family, it will be Juliette, BINOCHE, VINCENT, LACOSTE, or Paul KIRCHER. Then all of a sudden we've got to say, how do we do it so that they really, we can see that these 3 people share something and they're a family. And for me, that depends upon the different gestures and also of the way in which we try to give them a common body language. And this is something that the way in Juliette grabs Paul and hugs him, or Vincent, is not identical, but Vincent ends up does it the same way Juliette does, and there's a lot of embracing in the film between the different actors, and this is something that can only be done if there exists a good complicity between the actors, and the actors get along very well. And I like the idea that the family is the place of sensuality. And as regards the character of Paul, for me, it was very important that his homosexuality wasn't a discourse. For example, there are many films upon coming out of the wardrobe with coming out of the closet and, homosexuality and sensuality. For me, I was never interested too much in this. What's more interesting to me is to see what sensual animal that character was, and his sensuality for me is of fundamental importance to portray this young boy. Well, they haven't contradicted me. Well, it seems that they agree. Yes, I was going to ask the actors about this, but I've said, as they said, yes, I see that they completely agree. I'm not too sure whether there's one final question. Yes, Alicia? To address the full arc, I would like to ask about the role of Vincent, which has masculinity, which is a bit mixed up, and also the political side, the role that he takes as a man. The man, at the end of the day, is the elder son, that's all. That masculinity, and also the political side that he launches like a real man. But I'm not too sure whether you understand what I'm saying. I hope so. Masculinity of my character. I do what I can, what he can. He does what he can because he's in a situation that overwhelms him, and he tries to hide, as the eldest son, his grief. It's as if he had to be, quote unquote, the new father of the head of the family, and that's something that doesn't exist. Just simply, he's a character who does what he can, and his masculinity, well, I'm not too sure. He has such a complex relationship, and that's what I think is great in Christophe. The relationships are so complex that in a certain way, that's what gives authenticity to the film. It defines a family very well. And I have a young sister, and the relations are not at all equal. There's violence between the two brothers in the film, which defines them completely. It defines their relationship. And it's something which comes from the imagination of Christophe, this relationship with masculinity. I think that it's also related to that. I think, in any case, that he's a person who tries to undertake the role of a father, quote unquote, but he doesn't manage to do so. Okay, just a little point that I think that relate what Vincent says, that he has to undertake the role as a father of the family. The film launches an idea, and I would like to talk to Christophe Honoré about that. It talks very delicately about different possibilities of a family. We've got this family who's just come to pieces because of the loss of the father. But there are other families when, for example, when the character of Paul comes to the apartment where his brother shares a flat with another person, it creates like a new family as well. And there's a very beautiful idea of the fact in the film that families also emerge again. Or we don't only belong to one family, but we can also find other families on the move, on the go, in a very complicated situations. Like in the process of grieving, I think it's a beautiful idea which appears in the film. I would like to talk to you about this. Do you agree, or was it only my perception? No, you're completely right. In any case, the spectator is always right. The audience is always right. We haven't talked about, we've not talked about Lilio, who's a very important character in the film. In French, we have an expression which is like a family support. And he's the support of the family, the foundations. And he's the one is not going to replace the piece that was missing in the puzzle, which is the father. But he comes to a certain extent and at a certain moment complete the family so that the family can find itself again without revealing excessively the film. But it is true that at the end of the film, the meeting again between the mother and Luca is something which is provided by a person who's completely external to the family. What I liked about this is the mother could have that intuition, a very fragile intuition, but she herself is the one that establishes the link with his song, etc. So therefore it was very important for the film to finish completing the family after having shattered it to pieces or destroyed it. It was a type of important consolation in the film. And Jasson's character has left, Luca is in an age in which he'll have to construct himself abroad or outside. And even for me, at the end of the film, when the mother talks again,
et parle de sa solitude,
she already talks about her loneliness.
on peut en tout cas espérer que
But one can expect that
se dissoudre, enfin se dissiper. Et
after a certain amount of time, that loneliness is going to disappear. And these three characters
ailleurs que dans une famille. Et ça, c'est quelque chose.
need to live outside that
Un
family.
sentiment dont moi j'ai un souvenir très.
It's a feeling that for me,
Je pense que quand vous vivez.
that's quite present for me when I think, for example, when one loses a father,
Vous êtes enfant, mais où vous avez quand même
when one is very young,
de penser la mort.
but in an age in which one is aware of what death is and one can think about this, there exists this idea that the reconstruction can't be done within the family, but reconstruction can happen outside the family and helped by other people. And for me, this was something very important in the film. These three people, three characters, and we can see it very well in the family scenes. And the family, there's a lot of family in some of the scenes. It's as if this fact would have injected something into the three, would have rejected them from the family. There exists a certain solid loneliness that we have to admit. Okay, thank you very much to the team of lycéen, Juliette, Vincent, Christophe and Paul. Thank you very much. And Juliette, thank you very much for being with us and congratulations.